Welcome to the Marketing Share Podcast. We're back in studio. I'm Alec, and I'm here with Barb. Hey, Barb.
Hey, Alec, how are you?
I'm good.
My last name is VanSomeren, just FYI.
Yeah, I know that. I just never say it. It's too hard
I
to
know,
say.
Alec and Barb, that's
Alec
it.
and
That's all
Barb.
it is.
I'm not even going to ask people to have pronounce my last name. There you go.
I
It
know
sounds
how to
like
pronounce Alex.
sometimes it sounds like a
Alec
scene.
Cheung.
Chung. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah,
um, how you doing? You getting over a cold? You got a little.
I am. I got a little cold today. I'm a
Yeah.
little nasal on the podcast, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
That's all right. At least you're not. Hopefully, at least you're still able to do the podcast.
Of course.
All right. Let's talk about our guest,
Yeah.
Mark
So
Donnigan.
today,
Yeah.
Mark Donnigan, he bills himself as a virtual CMO. Now that's another one, right? We've had fractional, we've had
Yeah.
interim, we've got, now we have a virtual CMO. Anyway, but his specialty is really helping founders of early stage tech companies,
Hmm.
which come on, let's face it, there's probably a ton of those out there that are really trying to get started with their first several million, right?
Hmm.
And that's probably a great skill set to have out there. He also has a podcast, the Lean Content Engine, and the Marketing Pod. And he's going to share with us a little bit about how he creates some high impact marketing for very lean teams and early stage startups for the tech space.
Yep. And we talk on our show about the fact that this podcast is aimed towards marketing leaders trying to kind of broaden their expertise, but we also often cite that founders is another area, right? When you're a founder and you suddenly have to worry about marketing, we'd like to try to help. And I think Mark is a guest that can really speak to that angle. So for that reason, I'm interested and very eager to talk to him. I also just am dying to find out what is a virtual CMO. But I'm pretty sure he's very real, but I shouldn't joke about him that way. It's good. It's good. I think it'll be a fun conversation. Like just like you said, he seems to have a lot of really good experience focusing on these startups and how to get marketing off the ground. So
Yeah,
uh,
and let's face it, I mean, when you're a founder, you don't know what you don't know about marketing. And it seems intuitive, but it's not always. It's kind of tough to figure out how to really connect with customers and really get outside of your product and maybe
yep,
think about from their point of view, right?
yeah,
The so
for sure,
what, as we always say, right? In marketing.
yeah, for sure. All right, so should we go talk to Mark?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Hey, Alec, how's it going?
Good, Barb. I'm good to be here, glad to be here. And Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Barb, Alec. I'm really excited.
I know. So, Mark, you are a virtual CMO and GTM consultant for both startups and scale ups in the tech space. Tell us a little bit about how you got going on this career journey.
Yeah, exactly. The usual, Genesis story. How did this all begin?
Mm.
I'll skip the exactly how it began part, but so actually, I'm a seller. I started my career in sales. I discovered my school's Apple II when I was 12 years old. Taught myself BASIC. My dad was building silicon at HP.
Mm.
Involved in some really, really early chip projects that were pretty revolutionary. So, I grew up in this engineering household, right? It was a foregone conclusion I was going to be an engineer. Did a couple of years of computer science and realized, when you spend more time like rehearsing with your band and dreaming of being a rock star than studying, like that's kind of a problem. so, so dropped out, went to music school. And then I realized, oh, wow, this poor starving musician thing, it's not quite me. I love music. And to this day, I'm incredibly passionate, still play a little bit. But, I discovered sales and worked my way through college, actually selling Apple computers. This was way before the Apple computer stores, independent resellers. And one thing led to another, kind of advance in my career. And of course, along the way you look back and it all makes sense, right? But it's kind of like, well, wait a second, Mark, you're this creative guy, but then you've got this left brain thing going on. So it really kind of made sense that the paths converged of marketing and sales.
Hmm.
initially it's necessity. You've got a number to meet, and I didn't exactly have a lot of marketing resources, so it's like I kind of did it, and pretty soon you learn, oh wow, this marketing thing, this actually works, and oh, this is really fun, and wow, this is
Yeah.
tickles this whole other side. So yeah, I mean that's how I found my way into marketing, being a technical person and very, I like to say I'm forward leaning. So I don't call myself a technologist, but I'm forward leaning. And, all that has just come together. So I work with companies who are doing deep tech. There's some unifying themes with the companies that for more than 20 years I've worked with. It's usually advanced technologies that are very difficult to explain. They often are integrated solutions. So it's not like a black box. It's more of a, hey, we have developed IP that we want to license to you to
Yeah.
build, for you to build into your product.
Wow.
And let me tell you, you think B2B is hard. You
Yeah.
think selling technology is hard. It is really hard when you've got to convince somebody to take something, build it into their product. It's not
Mhm.
exactly totally proven, even though we have all the claims for it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's where I spend my time. I love entrepreneurs who are, literally shooting for the moon. And it's
Yeah.
just kind of where where I've decided to concentrate,
Hmm,
really.
hmm,
Mm. I love people who started with this in the sales seat, right? Because I did too. It was in beer, but I do think it's a good,
Yeah.
it's a good starter for people, especially in
Right.
marketing, right? And it
Yeah.
brings it down to that very realistic level of, can you engage somebody? Can you tell them about this?
Yeah.
Can you get them to make a decision? So I think that's great.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
Mark, you bill yourself as a virtual CMO. We've
Yeah.
heard the term fractional a lot on our show, interim CMO. So,
Sure.
can you explain the term virtual CMO and like what kind of clients or a little
Yeah.
bit more
What
about
does it
clients? Yeah,
what does it mean?
yeah,
Because there's so many different flavors,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Of virtual fractional and the way. So, look, I don't get hung up over, kind of formal definitions and all. Really, again, like probably a lot of us who have, a few years on our CV.
Hmm.
You wake up one day and either out of necessity or just really, in my case, it was more, although there were a couple junctures early on when I started working independently, taking on clients, more kind of on the side, nights, weekends,
Hmm.
kind of, that kind of a thing. But, it was a little more of a necessity, like, hey, something ended, or it's kind of like, ooh, somebody called, hey, could you help us out? It's like, that's, I make a few extra bucks
Mhm.
this month. That's cool. But over time, I just realized that I had amassed a lot of experience and knowledge. And I think a lot of people in the fractional virtual, kind of executive space have this is kind of what drives them. You wake up one day and you say, I've got this tremendous wealth of knowledge. And yet, in the role I'm in today, I'm spending 80% of my time doing stuff that adds, you know, not zero value, but relatively speaking, very, very little value,
Hmm.
and so wouldn't it be cool if I could find a way to take that industry knowledge or that specific expertise or, or just years of being in the trenches, and apply that across maybe, two, three companies, and they will get the most out of me. So they're going to benefit. I'm going to benefit because I'm only doing the stuff I really like,
Mhm.
and I'm really passionate about, and kind of everybody wins.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where I came from. But initially it really was as simple as just the phone ringing. It's as simple as somebody, hey Mark, I hear you might be available, or hey, wonder if we could pick your brain, which is
Yeah.
code for let's see if maybe you can help us out,
Yeah. Right.
and you like any of us, some of it's just seeing opportunity and you kind of go,
Yeah.
wow, this is great. So what happened for me is I've been working in this manner for years. In fact, I, kind of had the typical cycle of like, you'd work independently for a couple years and somebody would convince you to join them full time. And then that would go, 5, 6 years. And then, either something had happened to that company or just, or I'm like, okay, I'm ready. So I kind of did that, dipped in and out several times. And, finally I just said, you know what? I want to go all in. Like, I'm not going to sort of like play this, one foot in the, hey, I'm kind of looking for something more permanent, like I want to go all in because I'm totally convinced that I can help more people. I can be more effective. And I actually can gain a broader industry perspective. So I focus, I don't work with everybody.
Hmm.
When people call me up, I am very much interviewing them. I
Hmm.
mean, to the point that they're sometimes kind of a little, they're expecting like the sales pitch. I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell you what I do. And I'm peppering them with questions,
Yeah.
to even see, is this even a good fit? Can I really help them?
Right.
I can help everybody on some level, but it's like, is it really going to be a good fit?
Yeah.
So I just work with a small number of companies. I have very long engagements. My longest client is 5.5 years, and we're prepping for an IPO. And because if it works well for the company, it works well for me. Who cares what the mechanics of the employment relationship are? So,
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
um,
I think that's amazing. It sounds like you've carved out a niche in a certain area of expertise that probably there's some repeatability in there,
that
right?
helps. And,
Yeah.
and and it really does. And I'm very sympathetic to some of the listeners even now might be like, well, that's great for you to say, because, you've got this track record or whatever,
Yeah.
but like I'm kind of more of a generalist or it's like I've jumped around a couple different industries. And again, it's always easy to look back and say, oh, yes, I planned things. And, yes, I did plan.
Mhm.
But, let's face it, all of our careers are like zigzags and left turns and right turns and, up and down. And
Yeah.
then you wake up one day and go, hey, I like what I'm doing. I'm
Yeah.
happy where I am.
So what are some of the B2B, 'cause it sounds like you do most of your business with the founder. So what
Yeah,
are some of the,
100%.
what are some of your consistent things or problems that you're solving in some of these companies?
Look, I'm going to state the obvious.
Yeah.
The last 3 years, especially the last like 18 months, the marketing department, both in terms of how the teams are built, budgets for marketing, have just been just flipped on their head, So
Mhm.
a lot of changes. But I usually find myself getting involved at a couple different sort of consistent places, I guess, or stages, whatever.
Mhm.
One is one of the biggest challenges for a startup founder that I work with is they're almost always, actually not almost always, they're technical. They're engineers. They come out of
Mhm.
product. In some cases, have worked for the biggest tech companies in the world, and you would think, oh, wow, that's amazing. They're from, whatever, fill in the blank,
Right.
Google, Apple, Meta, just go down the list, right?
Mhm.
The problem is that they have been their whole career, including their education, on technology and science and product. They don't know
Mhm,
marketing,
mhm,
Yeah.
but yet all of a sudden you're a startup founder, right?
mhm,
And what often happens is because of sometimes their background and the amazing tech they built, they just hit it like right out of the gate. They get $1 million in ARR, or they win that big $5 million deal, so they're just like, this is easy, like, see, you know, and so it kind of that false, a little bit of a false positive, right? And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, you wake up one day and the investor's going, hey, that's awesome. You had a killer 2024. What happened in 2025? And what's
Mhm.
your plan for 26? And they're going, oh no, I don't really think I know what to do here.
mhm,
So because I am technical and because I kind of quote speak the language and I stay very focused in a particular area, I'm able to come in and like in the first 10 minutes of a conversation, they're going, oh, wow. Okay. Do you have capacity?
Mhm.
And it's not because I have some silver bullet on social media market. It's not because I know how to get indexed on Chat GPT and nobody else. It's not, yes, I have pretty good knowledge around the discipline of marketing, but it's because I know who the buyer is. And this gets back to this whole thing of like starting in sales. I get asked all the time, hey, for someone a little newer in their marketing career, how can they ensure they're still going to have a job, in 3 years, 5 years? What can they do? And I say, learn sales and learn your market cold, and it's amazing how many marketers don't want to do that.
Mhm.
And, and maybe they do, or they're shy, or they're kind of like, that's why I went into marketing, not sales. But let me tell you, if you don't know how to ring the cash register, as Christopher Lochhead says, in today's climate, it's going to be really tough to
Mhm.
sustain a career, in marketing. At least that's my observation.
Yeah.
So I get called from founders who are just like, help me figure out this marketing piece.
Yeah.
The other dynamic that I sometimes walk into is they have a marketing team. Now that might just be one person, usually one person, maybe it's one person and somebody is sort of part-time supporting. So a team, is still small, but they call saying, I don't know, maybe I need to replace this person, or maybe so it's usually this, not exactly like, tell me if they're good, but that's the implication.
Mhm.
Many, many, many times I come in, I say, actually, sure, they're kind of junior. Yeah. Like, could you always find, quote, a better person? Of course you could. But you know what? The problem is, Zach, you replace them, we recruit someone better. You're just going to have a different set of problems because you have to recognize where the stage of your business is at, and if you as a founder can't even go off and sell your product, well, then if you as a founder aren't even clear as the positioning, well, then no wonder your marketer is confused and confusing the market. No wonder your website's kind of a mess. And so then I come in that context to, help bring some clarity, drive some direction, in some cases, maybe a little mentoring,
Mhm.
and then there's, once I'm in and I'm helping, then it's always, well, all right, now let's build the team, let's scale the team, let's really turn this into something. But
Yeah. So, Mark, let me unpack that a little bit more, and because you're hitting on a niche that is right in our audience, right? We designed this podcast. Barb and I started this podcast to help early stage marketers, marketing leaders who are leading marketing
Mhm.
for the first time, but
Yeah,
also founders who find themselves in a situation where, oh, now I need to know something about marketing, right? And so the goal of our podcast has always been to try to speak to these people that are trying to quickly get up to speed on what the marketing discipline is all about. So
mhm,
I really want to ask you this question. So, because you're hinting at it, I think you're getting it. I want to hear a little bit more about it.
mhm.
It feels to me like a lot of times, because I've been in this situation too. I've been in some startups, right? The startup challenge is always you're trying to do the most you can on the smallest budget, right? Like
That's
when you
right.
say that they might have a marketer, that's actually, that's a good sign that they even have
Yeah,
a single
they
marketer,
actually have
right?
a marketer,
But a lot of
someone with
times,
a
yeah,
title of
yeah,
marketing.
a lot of times there's nobody yet in the marketing role, right?
Yeah,
So, what is your frame of reference for that founder when you go in and talk to them? Tell me about some of the things that you start to
yeah,
coach them and tell them. It's like, hey, look, if you want to get your marketing going right?
yeah,
What do you tell them to do? Or more importantly, maybe like also what are some of the things that maybe you tell them to stop doing? Like, hey, stop doing this. You need to
yeah.
stop doing this and do more of that.
Yeah. Okay. As you would expect, every encounter is different,
Yeah.
So, there are some sort of commonalities, common themes, if you will. What should you be doing? Let's start there.
Mhm,
Because generally there's not a whole lot they shouldn't be doing.
mhm,
Now sometimes it's like, hey, don't go spend $50,000 on a trade show booth.
mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
no, that's probably not the best investment. We'll
Yeah.
do that show a different way.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of what not to do, but what to do. So what I find is even the founders don't always now they know their product, they know their problem set, so they know that cold. Obviously they know their product, they built it.
Mhm,
They know their problem set cold because they built the solution for some problem. But where they still struggle is in understanding, how does that problem set map, i.e., the solution that I built, the product,
mhm,
the technology, the platform, whatever. How does that map to what the buyer, the customer, the market cares about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very critical, the word cares about,
hmm
because again, every founder I've talked to can tell me like that, oh, well, here's the problem the market has, and this is what we built, and this is how we built it, and this
hmm
is why we're better, and
hmm
there's this competitor doing, and they go through it, and I listen to them for 10 minutes, and I say, one problem in all that, everything you said is true, but the market doesn't actually care about it like you think they do. And then there's that deep breath. What do you mean? Everybody's telling us. I'm like, yeah, yeah. Everybody's telling you that. But here's how they're actually looking at it.
hmm
And if we don't reframe, then no wonder you're going to go at you, meaning that founders, or the founders sales team, et cetera, is going to go into meeting after meeting,
hmm
get the nodding heads, all the positive signals, and then crickets.
hmm
And that's why I find the death of so many startups is, time kills all deals. Number one saying in B2B sales, time kills all deals.
hmm
So, the fact that company X, company Y, company Z, whatever, has been talking to, big customer A, B, or C, and they've been now talking for 14 months
hmm
tells me you got a problem,
Yep.
meaning there's a problem there. And almost always it's lack of understanding what the market really cares about. So now you say, but wait a second, this is like a marketing discussion. That kind of sounds more like sales. Well, I don't know. I can build the most awesome website. I can run the most incredible code implementation that I just got off X from some marketer who claims he replaced 25 marketers with his Claude code build.
hmm
Yeah.
And I can have everything optimized to a T. But if I'm not speaking the language that the buyer is receiving,
hmm
it's all for naught. So, and I can't sit there as the marketing, as the fractional or the CMO or, whatever my title is and say, yeah, but look at the amazing job we did. At
hmm
the end of the day, the board and the VCs and, and the CEO are going to go, I know you did an amazing job, but we're getting zero. So I don't know why, but and this is also a trap that I see so many marketers and also fractionals fall into, because they actually come in and do good work. The problem is it's sort of misaligned work, is
Mhm,
maybe the
mhm.
right way to,
Y
put it. I don't want to say
yeah,
because it's good work.
yeah,
You look at the
that's
website, you're
interesting.
like, whoa, that's incredible.
Yeah,
Everything's SEO optimized.
right.
Wow, the messaging so tight. Whoa, until someone who really knows the ecosystem comes in and goes, that's not actually what the market's responding to right now. Or I understand why you're saying that, but that's not what they hear,
hmm
and therefore you're not going to get the
Yeah. I see so many founders who are super excited about their tech. It's like admiring your golf swing, right? It's
yeah.
like it's like, "Isn't it fabulous what I
You would
built?"
not be admiring my golf swing, but anyway.
But literally, it's like, "Let me tell you about my product," right?
Yeah,
Versus, "Let
yeah,
me engage with you on what your
yeah,
challenges are,
yeah,
and maybe I have a solution for that," right? It's like
yeah.
my partner always calls it customer empathy. Do you really have empathy for what they're
hmm
going through? Do you really
Mm,
know that?
mm,
I'm shocked that there's so many people that haven't researched, like, what their customer pain points are in some cases.
mm. Yeah. I have an illustration actually, very, very practical. My longest, running company that I've worked with to date, more than 5.5 years, took it from no product all the way to, coming into a very nice exit opportunity. And when the founder called me, now almost 6 years ago and struck up a conversation and said, hey, we really need you. He said all the normal stuff. Nobody knows who we are. We're new, like we really, we've seen what you've done for this company, that company. Wow, if you could help, this would be amazing. And I listened to him, and I think it was the first phone call. If it wasn't our first meeting, it was definitely our second one. And I said, I'm going to say something that, I'll explain it, but you might initially be a little taken aback. So that was my caveat. I said, I'm not going to spend really much time like marketing the brand. Who cares if everybody knows the name of the company? He's like, oh, really? Why is that? Good question, right? I said, because you're asking the market to behave in an entirely new way. And in fact, most of the market, or at least a large segment of the market, doesn't even believe, because they brought out some technology that was built on dedicated silicon, on chips. And at the time, everything was running, the conventional wisdom was software running on CPU. Therefore, the public cloud, like this was just the cat's meow. Like this was like, why in the world would you saddle yourself to dedicated silicon that if it's not in the data center, I can't use it? So I said, the very first thing we have to convince the market is that this approach is relevant.
Mhm.
If we don't convince the market of that,
Mhm.
doesn't matter
Mhm.
if your net promoter score
Mhm.
is, or it does not matter. And again, deep tech works different, right? So
Mhm.
if we were in more of a commodity space, then okay, and it's not to say brand's not important. So I'm also not, that's not the takeaway here. Because now there is. But what's fascinating is that over now 5.5 years of building this category called VPU,
Mhm.
um, guess what's happened? The
Yep.
company is now
Halo brand.
Yeah.
synonymous
Yeah.
Yeah.
with the category.
Mhm.
And have we had any marketing initiative that was brand? Zero.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Has there even been one OKR tied to it?
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
And
So
yet
in
it
our
just,
marketing lingo, right? I think what you're saying to founders that are listening to this
yeah,
episode here is right. You had to focus on the problem statement first. You had to build problem awareness. Without, you can't build brand until your buyer at least acknowledges that there's a problem
yeah,
and a new way to look
yeah,
at it. They're not gonna bother listening to anyone when they don't know that there's a problem
yeah.
to be solved.
Yeah. For those watching the video, you'll see some books. I have a lot of books behind me. Play Bigger is back
Mhm.
here. I am a huge proponent of category design,
Mhm.
and it's the point of view. It's the
Mhm.
POV.
Yeah.
And the point of view is, just kind of, a lot of these terms, there's different ways
Right.
people talk about it. But at the end of the day, it's that problem. It's that point of view.
Mhm.
What is the problem that must be solved?
Mhm.
And what is the best solution?
Mhm.
Like at the end of the day, just take out all the fancy, marketing terms. Like that's the point of view.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But isn't it fascinating how we sit here in this conversation? Three of us were nodding. I know a lot of listeners are kind of nodding, like, oh, yeah, yeah. Almost like, well, that's obvious. Everybody knows this, right? A lot of people know it, but it's amazing how many companies don't practice it, don't apply it, and then they end up spinning wheels in some cases, year after year.
Yeah, it's a bit of 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? We always say, right? It's a
Yeah,
bit of trying to see something from the other point of view, right? And
yeah,
not it's very easy to get excited about your technology or whatever you're building, but to try
yeah,
to think of it from that other person's
yeah,
point of view. And the other thing, what you just said was the point of view, right? You're not
yeah,
trying to sell something. You're trying to give knowledge and you're trying to give a perspective.
exactly,
And that feels
yeah,
like value to someone
exactly.
versus selling product. All right, now I'm going to go to a buzzword here. Tell me
Oh.
about the lean content engine because that
Yeah,
sounds like
yeah.
something I need.
Yeah, yeah. So, so lean content engine, I coined that in a way, working, kind of agile, just like the development
Mhm.
process, software development, life cycle. Really, it's just a way to say that there is a path and it's not hard to embrace. And the demos are all over X and LinkedIn and everywhere else of not only using tools, but of optimizing the human process, the human in the loop, to be able to produce content rapidly at scale, but not this isn't, I still kind of bristle like top of the funnel, mid funnel, bottom funnel. Like there's no buyer anywhere that identifies with, with all this. It's just marketing, and so this isn't like, oh yeah, top of the funnel awareness. It's the 7 reasons why. No, the market in most cases, there's always an exception, I guess, but has moved way beyond that. Buyers are more sophisticated. Nobody cares about our 18 reasons why you need blah, 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 fill in the blank, Nobody cares about that. They're not reading it. And so this whole idea of this lean, this fast moving content development process, getting back again to like what's some of the advice that I give founders. Like, first of all, you got to start talking about what you're doing. So you made an interesting observation, Barb. Too many founders do get so obsessed with just talking about the tech, but in some cases, it's like I find I'm saying you actually need to talk about this stuff. Not go like just spew buzzwords, but because they're invisible on LinkedIn, right? You go look at the founder's profile, and you're like, gee whiz, you barely even have announced that you have a company. Like,
stealth mode. You got to get out of stealth mode.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about it.
The lean content engine is just a very, very simple methodology. And believe me, there is nothing magic to it. I have a mini book and some on my website and some blog posts and up there, but it's just really simple. And, today speed is king. It really is. Speed matters. And it's not to then produce slop. There's, so the very important distinction, but, it is possible to produce really high quality with the tools that are available to us, and have it be at scale. So,
but now, okay, so I get that. I know where you're getting at, but I think the other side of that, the other argument that people might hear or feel like, wait, but then I also hear this, and that is that I just need to go. I just need to constantly churn out marketing activity, right? So just push out more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
How do you advise where's that balance? How do you get them to publish the point of view, right? But also not get in the trap of just
to over publish.
Yeah. Just get out, and then now it does start sounding more like they're just putting content out just to put content.
It's actually tricky because the more efficient that you get, both individually in terms of just being able to use the tools, really learn how to get a high quality result, and then in the organization. And there's some marketing teams that are really getting good, like 2, 3, 4 people, and they're doing the work that just 5 years ago would have easily been 20 or 25 people. And arguably they might be doing a better job, and so the challenge, and I actually have a little bit of experience in this, where I've had to pull back and say, like, no, we're not going to die if we don't put 3 posts out today, and in some cases, we ran into some really interesting issues where, because it's so easy to publish across all the platforms, like even looking at creative and saying, wait a second, we're cross, posting between profiles, like on LinkedIn, we have employees, but it's all the same creative. So when somebody's scrolling down, if somebody's connected to like 3, 4, 5, 6 people from the company, and then they're scrolling their feed, they're, it looks like it's all the same post, and so you have to address those. So here's the balance in it, is that, I think on one hand, it's easy to get weighed down in process and approval loops and, and all that. And look, if you're working in legal, you're working heavily like compliance, in industry where, compliant, then guess what? There's probably great reason why there's a lot of approval steps, but for most of us, arguing over that one word, or, oh, but aren't they going to be confused if we say that? No, they aren't. and for the one person who is, we'll send you a $25 Amazon gift card. Like it doesn't matter, right? So we've got to break through that. On the other side, though, when you make it so easy to just be push button, push button, push button, you have two paths. One is it just becomes AI slop, and that's really terrible. But in like my experience, the thing was, it wasn't AI slop, very, very high quality content, but we were using the same creative, meaning the same image. And even though the text was changing, when you're rapidly scrolling on these platforms, it's scrolling down and it's just like, holy cow, this looks like we're spamming the feed, And it was kind of one of those really interesting epiphanies because I was getting feedback from some sales from some internal, company folks, as well as even external. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We're not spamming. Like those are all, and then one day I was scrolling down like real fast and I went, why do we post 4 times? Oh, that's terrible. And then I backed up and I went, it's because we're using the same graphic, and the way that LinkedIn shows it, So you have to get into the implementation. And I think sometimes, like with HubSpot and with all these publishing tools, so you don't see that because you're not actually publishing native, And so it's fascinating how it's almost like, wait a second, we have all these tools, these agents that can do stuff, but we kind of need to go back into the platform and go old school and like just actually scroll a little bit like a user,
Experience it. How about the
you
user
know?
experience, right? It's like we
Yeah.
forget that. And you're right. I mean, to some degree, AI is giving us marketing activity at scale, right? And is that
Yeah.
really giving you great quality,
But is it giving us
out?
outcomes
Yeah.
is so I think that's a really good observation, Barb.
Yeah.
Like now we can do the activities, but are we
Mhm.
getting the outcomes?
Right.
And this is interestingly enough, I'm going through some, I'm hiring for somebody for one particular company and we have some very some somewhat difficult requirements, but this is not an impossible role. And it's not like we
Mhm.
set some bar so high, but I continue to be astounded how many people, if you just took a quick glance at the resume, you'd be like, oh yeah, of course I'd like to talk to this person. Then you start to kind of dig in and you realize like, wow, they were there pushing a lot of buttons through their career, but I'm not sure that there was much connection to what was the result,
Yeah.
you know? And today, I think again, if this is a little bit of advice, so again, for those who are listening, kind of wondering like not only how to grow, but how to remain relevant, in marketing, another hack is not going to benefit you. I work with someone, who has like 6 degrees. And, I've told this person, in a very polite, very, like, you don't need more education, you know, like, like
Yeah.
go and get close to the customer,
Yeah.
learn how to apply it, and then you'll be invaluable, but just kind of more
Right.
knowledge is right now anyway, not really what the market's looking for.
Yeah.
So,
You have something where you talk about marketing pods, and I think I
yeah.
know what that is, what that means, but illustrate that for me and then illustrate how that does drive an outcome,
Yeah.
some good examples of some outcomes. I think
Yeah.
people are always interested in that. If you have a
Yeah.
$1 to $3 million business, you're trying to go
Yeah.
from
What do
one to
you
two or one to
yeah.
three. How does it look?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it gets back to, one of the podcasts that I have is called the Marketing Execution
Mhm.
Podcast. And I just really, I love that word execution because it's action oriented, you know what it means. It means that we're going to get something done. We're going to execute. We're going to actually do something. Um, so the whole idea of the marketing pod came about is that I had again, anyone who's been a consultant or, fractional, virtual, whatever you call yourself, but is runs into this where you come in, you engage, and the first 90 days are just amazing. I mean, it's honeymoon of honeymoons, because it's like a thirsty person in the desert, just a little sip of water, and they're just like, oh, this is amazing. So we're bringing them that, right? So the first 90 days, we're giving them the playbooks, we're tightening up the messaging, we've redone the homepage on the website, we've given them some and they're just like, whoa, this is amazing. And then I observed this at about day 91. um, the tenor would start to change. And the tenor would be like, Mark, this is incredible. We have all the playbooks, totally agree with it. We're so excited. The new messaging, category design, love everything. But who's going to do all the work? Like, I don't have a designer. I don't have a writer who can, beyond just kind of, doing something like a one-off, or onesie twosie or whatever. Like, how are we going to do this? And so ran into this situation over and over, where the constraint was that there weren't the internal resources. In some cases, there wasn't the budget to go hire these people. In other cases, there was budget, but there wasn't time, or it was just like, we're trying to recruit, but we can't find the right person. Meanwhile, month after month is going, and guess what? The marketing work isn't getting done. Again, execution.
Right.
So I looked at this and said, like any fractional, along the way, you have a couple people you worked with that you would call, hey, could you help me out? Hey, I need a little, hey, and that works a little bit to a certain extent, but it doesn't scale. So I just decided I'm going to build a team. So that's what I did. So I built a team. What is unique about the approach that I took is that it's not sort of a collection of like, Upwork people or Fiverr people that I've used through the years. I kind of reached out and, hey, do you want to kind of be on my short list of, they work for me. They work for my company. Because of that, there's a lot of history there, working history. So they know, like, my style, they know how I think. So that then when I get hired to work with a company, when I'm retained to work with a company, then my team is right there with me. So it's not like for every, and like, hey, we need to build a landing page. And I find myself retelling my philosophy, explaining again how, they're just like, oh, cool. All right. So we're going to do it like this. No, let's do it like that. Okay. Here, are we going to use a story brand framework? Are we going to use a category design framework? No, we've got a mix. Here's some documents. Why don't you guys go mix that up? Come back, mock it up, give me a Figma design, and I'll give you feedback. And boom, it's done. And it comes back, beautiful work. We tweak it, we turn it around. The client's like, this is incredible. And so that does a couple things. First of all, you just deliver better quality work, faster. It lowers the friction. If you're looking for lock-in, it's pretty good lock-in, because all of a sudden, if it's like, well, like, Mark's smart, but maybe there's somebody who's got a little different perspective. Then it's like, ooh, but how are we going to replace, the designer, the writer, the HubSpot administrator, the digital market, and all of a sudden, the WordPress developer, like, ooh, what are we going to do there? And so that is the marketing pod, is a really, sort of my, Navy SEAL team, or whatever you want to say, that, that I bring in, extremely capable, worked with me for years, and, we're able to hit the ground running. And, and right now in today's climate, especially in technology, that's what companies want.
It sounds like you've created an outsourced marketing function. Like you bring the whole team with you, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's fascinating observation, Alec, because you might say, well, I mean, there's a lot of agencies that do, like, there's nothing special about that, right? And that's absolutely true, a lot. They're like, "Well, yeah, we have a marketing, team in a box. Like, what's so special? Call it a marketing pod, whatever,
Mhm,
it's marketing team in a box." I think what is a little bit different is that the typical agency approach is still about the fungible assets within each discipline that sort of get shuffled around a little bit. And even if the teams stay intact working with a client, it's a little bit more about, yeah, I've got my writing team, I have my, and so a rec comes in and basically it's like, okay, I'm gonna sign it out, and the lead of the writers will decide who's going to write that blog post or write that article or whatever. This is more like under the direction of me, and I have, I have a right hand person who, then manages and kind of keeps the team going, because I can't possibly be managing all the individual work streams, and it's not a good use of my time, and it's not what I want to be doing. So
mhm,
but it allows the client to maintain that we hired Mark Donnigan,
mhm.
knowing that, hey, and Mark gets this done,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah, the
so
distinction obviously would have to be that they're hiring you, and so they trust that this is the team you put to this is your SWAT team,
that's
right? They don't have
that's
to worry
exactly
about it,
right.
right? They don't
Yeah,
have to, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Most of the companies I work with, actually do have direct interaction with the team,
Yep.
but, that's only because over time, it's just like, "W why am I sitting in the middle?" Or even, "Why is, Jenny, as the team lead, why is she sitting in the middle?"
Mhm,
And so it's like, "Hey, I'm just gonna go to this person, go to that person." And then there's trust over the years, because I have very long relationships,
mhm.
and pretty much all of my clients have known me previously. And so I don't do so there's just a lot of trust,
Yeah,
and that's always a challenge with agency work,
yeah,
right? Like, oh, if they go direct, next
yeah,
thing you know, they're going to be hiring away all my people. And,
yeah,
I
and
know.
I
I mean,
get
you
that's
always have
very
to balance
legit,
that.
can be
Yeah,
a
it is
legit
legit.
concern, but hasn't been a problem for me.
Yeah. Okay. Give us some of the go-tos for those companies that that you're kind of you find in the playbooks, two or three things that are working now, especially
Yeah.
with LLMs and everything that
Yeah.
are driving some impact.
Yeah. So high value content, no surprise. But I'll unpack a bit more what I mean by high value. High value is not just what the market cares about. It can be trendy, and trendy doesn't mean it's not high value, but it can just be a topic, like around AI. There's
Right.
some very in the markets that I'm working in, there's some very specific AI topics that
Mhm.
are legitimately people are looking for information. So obviously content, producing content around that. Content that contributes to the buying cycle, to the buyer's journey. That's another area where founders just don't understand. Like, just don't go write a blog post about something that you're interested in. Write a blog. Now, if that intersects
Mhm,
with a question that the majority of your customers or your potential clients, or those who you would like to have give you money, if it intersects with what they need answered as part of the buyer's journey, then awesome, write about it. But it's far more effective to take from sales conversations very real. It can be as simple as taking an objection and writing
mhm,
a blog post that that answers it, right? And then the next
mhm,
time you get that, you can say, "Hey, I'm going to send you a link. We
mhm,
actually, I think you'll appreciate, the answer there."
mhm,
But it can be a little more advanced than that. But it's really writing content, high value content. So that's number one. That works. Always has.
mhm,
So that hasn't changed. I think the hub. I'll make this observation. I think the HubSpot playbook, and hey, I've been a HubSpot user for years.
Yeah.
so this isn't like an attack on HubSpot at all, but the HubSpot playbook of the gated ebooks, and this goes back 15 years, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that sort of pulled people away from like just adding value. And
Right.
in the very, very early days, those ebooks were adding value. That's why they worked. But over
Right.
time, as the market flooded with all these gated ebooks, it became
Mhm,
just sort of like noise, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
You know, 10, 12
So
years
you're a
ago.
fan of the ungate, right?
Oh, I am a massive fan of the ungate. Now, that does not mean that there's not both a place and a time, to get an email address. Oh, of course there is. And there's great way. And there's places where, the audience, the customer, the target is happy to give it to you, but they're happy to give it to you because there's an appropriate exchange. It's
Mhm.
not just, I'm gonna send you a free PDF. Now fill out this whole form. Like, what?
Okay, then what do you tell the founder who says, "Yeah, but then how do I know when they've used my content? How do I know that my content is being valued and used?"
Well, I don't work with founders, and I mean this, and it's not to sound arrogant or whatever, but I don't work with founders who don't get marketing.
Mm,
You know,
mhm,
so if their question is just a legit like, "Hey, I'm a data-driven person,
mhm, mhm,
Yeah.
and I just wanna kinda understand, like, gee whiz, we're doing all this, like, how can I" Now, there's nothing wrong with a question from that angle,
mhm,
but if it's
mhm.
being driven from a, "Prove to me that we're getting
Mhm.
ROI for whatever we're paying
Sure.
you," or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
then it's like, "Sorry, we are not gonna be
yep,
good together."
okay,
You know, I you
yep,
know,
Yeah.
I don't work in those environments,
yeah.
and nor should anybody really.
Yeah.
I know sometimes, kinda you get stuck there or you get tricked into those environments,
Well, so
but,
then, okay, let's play the first one though. So let's just say they are just, "Hey, look, I just wanna know, I'm a
yeah.
data-driven person." Like,
Yeah.
how do you
So,
answer?
okay, so the first thing is that, you're going to get 0 data if nobody fills out your form.
Yeah, yeah,
So let me go pull some stats and just show you like how many clicks and engagements or views you would have gotten with no form,
mhm,
and then just statistically, because there's a lot of data out there, of what that'll be with a form.
mhm,
Are you okay with that?
mhm,
you know
mhm,
and in some cases it might literally come down to, are you okay with that? If you're okay with that, then okay, we'll put a form on it.
mhm.
But I'm recording this call and I'm going to remind you in
Yeah,
90 days,
yeah, yeah,
when you want to know why only 13 people have
yeah,
downloaded your whatever,
It also
so
gets back to the funnel, right? I mean, if we're totally,
yeah,
mesmerized on top of the funnel and how it's moving down the funnel,
yeah,
sometimes you will actually have a great meeting. I mean, there's a lot of tools out there that are now connector tools, right? That are
yeah,
connecting you to buyers, which I think
yeah,
is a lot of interesting
yeah.
new ways to connect with people as well.
Yeah, I think, again, this sort of discussion is
Yeah.
there's a lot of, I would say nuance to it, but it's not really nuance. There's a lot of work to it,
Yeah.
because there are some incredible platforms and technologies that are available to track users in an ungated environment,
Right.
and you're going to get different signals. I really think about it more like signals
Hmm.
than, okay, I don't know that it's Mark Donnigan, but because I don't have a way to track Mark Donnigan, especially with GDPR and
Yeah.
everything else. However, I can get some really, really good signals to know that, kind of a profile, and whether or not I know if it's Mark Donnigan or not, in a lot of contexts, if you really think about it, doesn't really matter. You know, but what does matter is, are we getting signals that we can map to
Hmm.
something that tells us this is working or this isn't working,
mhm, mhm,
or we need to examine. And again, a lot of it just depends on where do you want to put your resources.
mhm,
You can put your resources in telemetry and all the amazing dashboards. If you have the resources to do that and do great marketing, awesome. By all means, that you should do that.
Yeah.
a lot of the companies I'm working with, they can't do both, you know? And so you kind of take what you can get on the analytics telemetry side, you know, and then there's the anecdotal, you know, regardless of what the metrics are saying, if your head of sales is coming back on a regular basis and going, wow, I'm going into more meetings and they know who we are. They trust us. They're, you know, like I'm not having to spend as much time, you know, sort of telling them the story of the company. They're like, yeah. We've done our research. We've heard about you guys. Let's talk about the product. You know, it's like, how do you quantify that? But that becomes, I mean, that's a data point, right?
Yeah.
So,
All right. Go ahead. What do you think about this medium? What do you would you recommend this medium for
I
startup?
love podcasts. Love it.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm really glad you brought that back up because so I have we were talking before we hit record. You know, I guest on a fair number of podcasts. I'm a guest host on a industry specific podcast. I'm just about to launch with one of my clients uh, uh, a technical podcast. I have another podcast with the same client, and I have another AI and kind of overall like technology and business direction podcast called Signal and Scale, which we haven't even really launched it yet. We have a first couple interviews up on YouTube. So I do a lot of podcasting. It is hugely effective. It's an incredible medium. It is still to this day, it's a very accepted medium. I think it's still just a little bit misunderstood as to, how quickly it can work, what it can really do. Sometimes it's counterintuitive how effective it is when you're only averaging 500 downloads an episode, you know, and people can be, and I have this real experience. A couple of the shows, it's about 500 downloads, you know, within the first 7 days, you know, of course, over time, you know, maybe over the next 90 days, it's another 500. But, you know, and you say, but Mark, it's only like 1,000 downloads. Like how, you know, and yet again, anecdotally or through forums where there's free text fields and, you know, how'd you hear about us? Or, you know, and guess what? Podcast is entered, you know, and it just works, you know. It takes time, it takes investment. You guys know this very well. But there are so many possibilities, you know, with podcasting that's a medium I highly recommend that everybody explore. Biggest challenge with it is not everybody is good on a mic. And good on a mic is different than even like being able to present, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know this, being hosts and having a lot of so that's the one tricky that makes podcasting sometimes a little bit tricky as like hey, this is a permanent part of my playbook. Like, of course, we're going to implement a podcast.
Yeah.
You know, I work with some founders and it's like, it's not that's not how they express themselves.
It's an uphill battle. It puts a lot more pressure on the host. So to try to facilitate. But well,
but I think it's a muscle that's great for founders to actually learn how to do, right? I mean, you know, I mean, it's up there with presenting your company. It's up there with, you know, being able to have this talk track, you know, with somebody on your feet is pretty, you know, that's like 101 CEO, right?
I don't disagree.
Well, Mark, it's been great having you on the show. I think for founders, at least, I think this will be a really good episode. And you know, I don't think we've really done an episode that's very, very focused on the founder perspective. So I really appreciate hearing you and having you come on and talk about this stuff. If people want to get in touch with you, where should they go to find you and work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, all over LinkedIn. So just Mark Donnigan, and very easy to find there. And then my website is growthstage.marketing. So it's a .marketing domain. So
go marketing.
Yeah, so growthstage.marketing. Everything's ungated.
Okay.
You would expect.
There you go.
a lot of mini books. I publish a lot, and it's all from a tech startup kind of founder perspective. There is a lot of strategy, but a lot of implementation type. Like how do you
Yeah.
actually do it? What should you
Yeah.
be doing? So it's less sort of marketing theory and more.
I know, right? That's without execution. It becomes this theory, strategy is great, but you got to actually get it into market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Great to see you. Thanks,
Well,
Mark.
thank you.
Thanks, Mark.